Let me tell you a story that affects millions of Europeans. A story of government financial repression and the silent erosion of your life savings. You see, as a European myself, I have witnessed the people closest to me blindly give the money they have worked for their whole life to the reputable pension funds. You know, the ones run by the guys in suits with financial master's degree, working in the tall buildings with big clean windows. And to see what is happening to the life savings of my mother, my sister, my best friend's parents, and all those people is sickening. So I decided to make this video for all of you. Regardless of how old you are, it either affects you, your mother, or both. Today, you'll understand why the current system is designed to lose you money, how it gives the illusion of safety, why it performs worse than even simple investments you can do by yourself, and finally, how you can fix it. So here is how the system works currently. When you have a job, part of the money you receive goes to your pension fund automatically. There is nothing you can do there except start working for yourself. However, apart from the mandatory funds, there are also voluntary ones, and they suck a lot of people in because of their simplicity. In addition to the social security provided by the state, which is bankrupt anyways and will become more bankrupt as the population ages, you can invest in the markets for additional return. You just give the money to a big financial institution and they take care of it with best intentions at heart. Right. So the doctors, the lawyers, the judges, the teachers, the firefighters, you know, the people on whose labor our society depends and who are too busy to watch YouTube videos or read books about investing, trust their government and their financial institutions to take care of their retirement money. And as a child of two doctors, I know very well that these people need to spend their whole energy on what they do. I get it. But I'm here to tell you what you don't want to hear. And it is that you're being screwed. The whole system is designed to take advantage of the fact that you trust your bank and your pension or insurance provider and are too busy to take care of your money yourself. Here is how they do it. The pension fund providers have mandates in what they can invest and what they cannot invest in. These mandates are masked as being there for your own safety and are advertised as reducing the risk of your portfolio. But their goal is far more insidious. Before I explain what it is, let me first show you what I mean so you know I'm not simply making stuff up. I will compare the best performing pension fund in my country with the most simple, basic possible investment a person can make on their own. So here on this website, I have chosen to sort the pension funds in Bulgaria, where I am, by annual returns. I automatically translated the page with Chrome, which will explain some of the weird stuff you see. Anyways, the top fund has achieved average annual return of 2.72% for the past decade. Now, let's compare that with the most simple, basic possible investment you can make. Imagine your portfolio is 100% in one ETF, the Vanguard Total World Stock Market ETF. It includes companies from all over the world, including emerging markets, and has the biggest 3,600 stocks in it. It is as basic and foolproof as it gets. So you would expect that basic investment that has only 0.22% annual fees to perform worse than the best pension fund managed by professionals with master's degree in finance, right? Wrong. The fund has provided investors with 129.92% return for the past 10 years, giving you 8.58% annual growth rate. This is over 3 times the return of the best performing pension fund in my country. And by the way, this performs worse than the S&P 500 ETF, which is the biggest and most popular and used by many people as the benchmark. The S&P 500 ETF, which has the biggest 500 companies in the USA in it, has returned an average of 12.37% for the past 10 years. However, since it is concentrated only in the USA, I decided to take an even more broad and foolproof example and went with a fund that includes the whole world with both the good and the bad parts. And as you can see, it still beats the best performing pension fund over 3 times. Now, this is not an endorsement for you to invest in this ETF, and I currently don't have any investments in it. If you want to check my top 4 stocks and ETFs for the current economic and geopolitical environment we are in, you can go to the link in the description and get the report for free. The point here is to simply illustrate a point. But Ognan, these funds are more dangerous than the pension funds. Really? Are they though? Let's find out. Let's first assess the drawdown during the market crash of 2022. Drawdown means how much value has the fund lost in a particular period. I will use that as the first measurement of risk. The second one will be the inflation rate, but more about that in a second. Now, since obviously the pension funds, at least in my country, are not very keen on the average person finding out about their performance, they make sure to hide it deep within their websites. So I don't have all the information I need for all of them. Regardless, for the drawdown example, I will use a chart of a fund for which I was able to find one, the pension fund of the second biggest bank in Bulgaria. As you can see, the drawdown in the bear market in 2022, which means a market in which prices are going down, is 12.07%. What has been the drawdown of our example ETF in 2022? It was 17.18%. So yes, 5% more in the worst year in a decade. And the ETF outperforms all of the pension funds with more than 6% annually for the past 10 years. So you can see how the lies you are being fed about your pension fund being safer are basically twisting the truth. Yes, probably it won't fall as much in a downturn because of the instruments it is required to hold. But it is the same instruments that are holding it back, as we will see in a bit when I explore the assets in those funds. So if your definition of safe is that once in a decade it might not fall as much, but will lag behind the market in all other times, well, my friend, then you probably have your definition wrong. This is an issue I have seen with a lot of people who are not familiar with investing. And it's a psychological one. Basically, you are frozen with fear that your hard-earned money will be gone, so the minute you hear about potential losses, you panic and you want to go to the safest investment vehicle possible. This is why most people even stay in cash all the time. And yes, I understand it, and I can understand where you're coming from. You're not to blame. The blame lies with all these government bureaucrats, bankers, and financial advisors who know about this fear and take advantage of it. They take advantage of it in order to steal your life savings for their own means, knowing full well what the end result will be. But this is the worst part. What you don't realize is that it is exactly that fear that you will lose your money that is actually making your worst nightmare come true. Which is very sad and ironic because the thing that you are running from is actually happening to you. While trying to not expose your investments to a big risk, you are gradually moving away from the dream of having a comfortable retirement by performing worse than even basic investments you can do yourself. And not only that, but while you think you are making 1 or 2 or 3% per year on your pension fund, you are actually losing money. Why? Well, because of the worst thing about pension funds we haven't even talked about yet, but we will right now. And this is the fact that they perform worse than the silent killer of wealth and savings, inflation. You see, the other insidious game that is being played on you is making you believe that your pension fund is working for you even though it is doing it slowly. But the reality is that even by investing in it, you're getting poorer. Think about it. You're putting your money to work with a reputable financial institution that has been given the green light by the government. And by doing that, you are actually losing money. Let me show you how this works. I'll be using numbers again from my country, Bulgaria, as Europe is a big and diverse place, but I'm sure the picture won't be that much different in other countries. The inflation rate for the past 10 years is 45.5%, which makes the annual rate 3.82%. So basically every pension fund in my country which is giving you less than 3.82% per year, and that is all of them, has actually been losing you money. And again, this is based on the official government statistics, which we all know are made up so that it makes the politicians look good. Some of those indices exclude food and energy because, why would you need those? But they might include piano lessons or concert tickets. And so your future self, while saving for retirement, is actually losing money, which should terrify you. Now, I know that by now you agree with me that this is not fair and you need to change it. But you're probably asking how and what to do. Before we get there, though, I need to explain to you why that is happening. Because many of you might be wondering why a random guy on YouTube that has been successful investing on his own and doesn't even have financial or economic degree can know all of these things, but bankers and pension fund managers don't. And the truth is that neither am I so special, nor are they so stupid. Well, some of them are, but in general I wouldn't count on that being the primary reason, as many clever people work there. The primary reason goes way deeper, and I will explain it to you right now. It is the story of a dying, aging, indebted system that is struggling to survive and is trying to make you pay for it. You see, all of the major governments in Europe have the same big problems. The first one is aging population. The European continent, just like every major developed region in the world, faces a total demographic collapse. Here is a map provided by the European Commission. In order to have the population stay the same, you need 2.1 births per woman. The idea is that two parents give birth to two children, and the 0.1 part accounts for some cases of child mortality. In 2022, the average birth rate in Europe was 1.46 children per woman, way below the replacement level. The scarier thing is that this is not only the average, but literally if you look at the map, there isn't a single country on the continent that is even close to 2. What does that mean? Well, less young people to pay taxes and work that have to support more and more older people who are retired and don't work or pay taxes anymore. Once you go into that downward spiral, there is no going back, because the older the population gets, the bigger the burden is on young people to support it, and that means they can afford to have less children, which makes the problem even worse, etc., etc. This is the percentage of GDP going to pension spending in different countries around the world. Notice how Italy, Portugal, and France lead the pack, with Italy spending 16% of its GDP on pensions. And bear in mind, this is before the population ages further and the GDP goes down because of the lack of workers. The percentage is set to increase to 25% of the GDP in the UK in 2025. And how have the governments been dealing with that situation? One word: debt. The debt to GDP ratio of a lot of countries in Europe has been steadily rising and is reaching dangerous levels. Major economies like Italy, France, and Spain have more than 100% debt to GDP, and the average for the EU gets closer and closer to the 100% mark. This is directly connected to the population decline. As more and more people are getting older without being replaced, more and more countries are desperate to replenish their tax base and are compensating with taking on debt. You can see in this chart the debt of both EU and the USA, with the EU being in blue, ballooning in the past 15 years. Well, let's see the chart of the fertility rate. This chart shows the long-term decline of European fertility. It fell below replacement level way back in the 70s and has never recovered. It made a bit of a rebound in the early 2000s and then started trending down again. Do you see the correlation here? The chart of the debt is going up at the same time as the chart of the fertility is going down. Because of the population decline and a lot of other factors like lack of innovation and over-regulation, in which we don't have time to get into this video, the European economic growth rate has been trending down for decades. How have the governments compensated for that? By taking on more debt. And this is likely to continue. According to the UN population forecast, this is how Europe's population will look like in the next century. So this will force governments to take on more and more debt. Now, why does this matter to you and how is it related to your pension? Well, the answer is that governments need to pay interest on the debt they take. And the lower it is, the lower their expenses are and the more debt they can take. Which means they will try to do everything in their power to make the interest rate on the debt be as low as possible. This explains the low, near 0% interest rates we have had for decades now that have distorted the economy and increased wealth inequality ever since the financial crisis. But apart from the central banks making the rate zero, one of the other primary ways governments artificially lower the interest on their debt is by having a lot of demand for it. The more buyers they have, the more they can afford to not offer high interest rates because they don't need to compensate people for holding their debt as much as they otherwise would. Think about it this way. If no one wants to lend you money because they will only receive 2% per year from you, you increase the reward. You put it up to 3%. And if still no one wants it, you make it 4% and so on until someone says, yes, okay, at 6%, I'll give you money. So the more buyers the governments have for their debt, the less reward they can give, hence the lower the expense for them. This is where the pension funds, banks, and insurance companies come into the game. These entities are the biggest pools of capital in the economy. And so what the governments do is create regulations to force them to purchase government debt because it is the safest asset, and they justify it by saying that this way they are protecting the people. Well, it's interesting to me how they are protecting people by forcing them into an asset that continually performs worse than the official inflation rate, which we all know is understating the real inflation. And so this is why pension funds are forced to have a lot of government debt, or the so-called government bonds, in them, regardless of the fact that it devalues the savings of the population by making the fund lag behind inflation. Here is the construction of a popular pension fund in my country. Apologies for the fact that I have not been able to translate it, but it is a picture. Regardless, in Bulgarian, it basically says that the portfolio is 26% in stocks and 74% in bonds. And by the way, if you think these stocks are Microsoft or Nvidia, you are dead wrong. The majority of them are obscure local companies that I've never heard of and that definitely should not have more weight in a portfolio than a company like Amazon or Coca-Cola. But I guess this is another regulatory framework forcing the pension funds to support local businesses. Going back to the asset allocation, it is ridiculous. Many of you might have heard of the 60-40 portfolio that is used by a lot of Americans, where there are 60% stocks and 40% bonds. I have made a video about it on my channel where I describe how it is absolutely insane to me to have 40% of your portfolio in bonds, and I back it up with data. However, here we have 3/4 of the portfolio in bonds, the majority of which are government bonds. Since bonds are fixed instruments that pay you very low fixed interest, the principal of the bond doesn't rise, unlike a good company's share price. Long-term bonds are getting destroyed by even a moderate inflation percentage of 2 or 3%. However, this is the entire game. This is why they do it. They force the pension funds to buy the government debt, which lowers the interest they have to pay on the debt, which allows them to take more debt. And they pay for it with your savings. This sneaky tactic is also part of a complex strategy called financial repression. You can read the definition of the term here, but basically what it does is that governments, through various methods, some of which I just explained, are able to suppress the interest rate savers get and indirectly borrow more money from the savings of society to pay off their debts. This is one of the main reasons I avoid, and I advise anyone I know to avoid investing in pension funds, government bonds, or keeping their money in the bank, and I buy real economically productive or scarce assets. Because when your savings are being channeled to the government through financial repression from your bank, where you get no interest, and from your pension fund, which underperforms inflation, you are getting poorer with time. However, you don't notice it, because when you log into your bank account, you see the same number. And when you check your pension fund, it says that it has been growing with, let's say, 3%. However, when 10 years have passed, you realize you are actually poorer. This is an insidious tactic because people measure their life in euros, and when they see the same or higher amount of euros, they don't have the psychological reaction of anger and loss. If every time you logged into your bank account, you saw your balance decline despite you not touching it, you will be furious. And when enough people are furious, governments are in trouble. However, by using financial repression, they don't need to directly take money from your bank account, but instead they use financial sorcery and they take your money either way, leaving you poorer and poorer without making you suddenly angry enough to go to the streets. Okay, if you're still watching and haven't been depressed enough, I'm here to tell you that there is hope. There are things you can do to change your future and avoid getting your retirement destroyed. However, they require a little bit of effort on your part so that you can start taking care of your savings on your own. Now, if you're employed, you can't stop investing in these pension funds completely. But what you can do is to get educated so that you can invest whatever money you have left in far better places instead of putting them in the voluntary pension funds. One way you can do that is by continuing to watch videos like this and increase your financial and investment education levels, which is what I did years ago. Frankly, I did it because there weren't any other options back then. If you want additional help with that and a faster, more structured way to do it, then I invite you to my Investing Masterclass, for which you can sign up from the link in the description. Either way you choose to go forward, I hope I was able to help you understand how you are getting robbed of your future. It's up to you now to stop it. I will see you again in my other videos or in the masterclass.